Welcome to another episode of the Fist on Chin Show on the Caddock Sports Network. My name is Chris Sarda. This over here is Afshin Hayat. And today we're going to talk about UFC 259. There is a whole bunch to talk about. Before we do that, though, you can find us at Caddock Sports on Instagram and Twitter, and at Fist on Chin for this very more specific MMA stuff is where I'm doing a lot of calling the rounds and talking MMA and stuff, so I don't flood the Caddock Sports channel. Also, Afshin's at Afman, Afamazing, and you can find us here every Sunday morning talking about either the UFC card that was Saturday night or the news that was happening, and also Thursday mornings we do the midweek previews and news and stuff. So there's so much to talk about here. I mean, I want to talk about Askarov and stuff, and we may not even be able to get to that. We may have to do two shows, but let's just start right from the top. You and I, you made it very clear we're rooting for Jan Blachowicz. The poor guy is always an underdog. No one thinks he's going to win. He did come in. He did come into the UFC a little bit slow. But I mean, since that 2-4 run or whatever it was, since that where Gustafsson really beat him down, he's really found his mark in a weird way. He actually has good footwork in a weird way, and he's been able to win. You and I both had Israel winning. You had him in a second or third round KO. I had it as a decision. One thing I would have not expected is for Jan to win a decision, for Jan to actually have 3 or more rounds on his side. What are your initial thoughts on the fight?
You're correct. We both picked against Jan. I'll say, poor guy, but I'll say, his hardcore fans who bet on him every time must be loving life. So he was over plus 200 last night. It's a really nice win for him on so many levels. And one of the reasons why is because it's really hard to BS or fake your way into a 25-minute decision win, especially when there wasn't something so dramatic like an injury or a major knockdown or something that changed the course of the fight. He had to show that he was the better fighter last night. I thought that he fought fantastically. I thought that he used your exact strategy in the second half of the fight, which was to grapple. We talked about this. If he comes out with the same strategy, that's like playing with fire. And it looked like in the first half of the fight, if the takedown was there via like a clinch, he was going to take it, like a body lock takedown. And then in the second half, he was like, I can just double leg this guy. If I get a clear path to a double leg, I mean, every time in the 4th and 5th rounds, I think he really made his weight felt because Izzy couldn't get up.
It really looked too like he just didn't have the takedown prowess in those first few rounds, because whenever there was a clinch, it felt like he's going after a really lazy single leg. There was a quick takedown early that Izzy got up right away. So it really looked like Izzy just had his number on the wrestling defense for a second. Until he started doing the double legs.
It did. It looked like he had to switch up his game plan, that he was actually going to have to commit to a real takedown rather than try to get like a body lock, get like a lazy single leg. For a moment, maybe second or third round, I think it was, where he got behind Adesanya. It looked like he was going to get one of those standing rear naked chokes for a second. Oh. But Adesanya had really good movement. He was very prepared for spinning out in an explosive manner every time Blachowicz got a hold of him, and so Blachowicz couldn't do it. He couldn't get a tie clinch, you couldn't wear him down against the cage, so Israel was really prepared for that.
On that standing, I think it's important too, because I think that's why I gave that round. I think that was in the first round, but maybe I might be wrong about that, but that's why I was giving Israel some of those rounds, because when Jan had, when he was going for that, I'm not going to say that he had it close, but when he was going for that standing choke in the breakup when he got out, I think Izzy really got him, because Jan
stumbled him, right? Is that the one?
Yeah. He didn't look good the rest of the round, and and actually looked tired the rest of the fight, to be honest.
Yeah.
So that was one where the scramble was on Izzy's side, I believe. You know, I only watched it live. We haven't rewatched it yet. But this would be a great fight to rewatch now that I think about it.
Oh, I can't wait to rewatch it. It was a really fun fight. It was very tactical. It was a guy who had more stand-up weapons versus a guy who showed better timing and also better durability than most people give him credit for, especially at age 38. I'll say this. First round could have gone either way. I gave it to Adesanya. Second round could have gone either way. I gave it to Blachowicz.
Yeah.
Third round was very close. I gave it to Adesanya. And fourth and fifth, I gave to Blachowicz. The judges all had it 4 rounds to 1.
Yeah.
And 2 judges gave a 10-8 round in the 5th, which I thought was good.
So let's talk about judges, and since we have the exact same cards, sometimes it's nice to talk about that because we can see where we saw it a little differently, but we do have the exact same cards. So let's talk about the judges and Rogan and Cormier, who are both great. Don't get me wrong, but you know, when they're calling a fight, I mean, I just see it all the time. When you're calling a fight, you like forget sometimes what happens earlier in the round, or I don't really get why it's that way. You know, because for a minute, Cormier was actually giving Jan, or wasn't giving Jan, the second round, you know, and then when the tweets started popping up and when Anik said that, you know, social media seems to be giving that to Jan, Cormier sort of changed, if you notice that. So before we get to the judges, because those 10-8 rounds are a good conversation piece too, let's talk about the announcers. I find now I gave Adesanya 1 and 3, so maybe I was swayed by him too, you know. But I get how a judge wouldn't necessarily do that because I saw Adesanya. I saw a better kickboxer, right? But if you're sitting there on the side of the ring, those punches that Jan was getting through, you know, were powerful punches that Adesanya wore. And I'm not sure Adesanya was doing the same. You know, he had some nice, I mean, beautiful looking kicks, just like as technical as can be. But they got all arm, things like that, you know. So I don't think it's crazy, and we'll talk about the 10-8s in a second if that's crazy, but I don't think it's crazy to have given you know, Derek clearly looks like he gave, according to MMA decisions, Jan a 10-9. Everyone gave Jan 10-9 in the first round, for example. I thought that I was just what it looked like to me before the takedowns and in the third round was that, you know, okay, Adesanya weathered the storm and he's going to start taking over this fight now, especially in the championship rounds. Also because Jan's takedowns look so, you know, lazy in the first 3 rounds. And that ended up happening. And also it ended up, you know, being that the judges still saw this fight completely different than I did.
They did. What I'll share with you is that related to the commentary was making it seem like Jan was afraid to engage, and they kept saying he kept biting on the feints, which he did a little bit. I didn't see it as much as they did, but then when they flashed a graphic on the screen that basically said that Jan was up like 40 strikes to 28, and then John Anik was like, just to be known, according to the official stat counters, he's up like 42 to 28. Looking at UFCstats.com, Jan was up 41 to 34, outlanding in both the first 2 rounds. And then it seemed like the guys sort of realized that they were. I kind of felt Rogan and Cormier were kind of feeding into each other a little bit. Rogan tends to do that sometimes just based on how he sees it. He kind of paints the picture. And I thought Cormier, and that's all right, that's what you're supposed to do. But I thought Cormier was feeding into that a little bit, and they both were doing it the wrong way. I thought that they were both kind of just like counting down the moments so they could say this old guy Jan was going to get caught. That's kind of what it felt like a little bit. And don't get me wrong, he got tired, which doesn't look good for the judges. But Israel got tired too later in the fight. I think after the first couple rounds, they started being a little bit more neutral.
What's funny is I saw it that way though too. Like independent of what rounds you gave to Jan and Adesanya, it looked to me like Jan was getting cut down and it was going to eventually end. And I guess the other. So let's go to this 10-8 round now. I my opinion is weird here, so I have to see how I can give this.
Okay.
I think that I don't think those were 10-8 rounds by the rules, but I think that they should be 10-8 rounds because in relation, does that make sense? It's like my thoughts on a travel. I think James Harden is not traveling, but I think that we should make what he's doing a travel.
Okay. I hear exactly what you're saying.
If that makes any sense. So two judges gave it 10-8. And the truth is that round,
Fifth round,
in
right?
relation to the rest of the rounds, was an ultra dominant round. It seems unfair, to give the same score to round 5 as you would round 2. So that's why I see it, as a 10-8. Really, I just think Jan won the round. I think he had a slight edge on the stand-up in the first couple minutes. And then when it went to the ground, he controlled the rest of it, right? So I would still score it a 10-9, by the rules as I see them. But that was happening a lot tonight, by the way. There were a decent amount of 10-8s.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to go see. So D'Amato, who seems like he's a judge in. Sometimes it seems like Sal D'Amato judges MMA and boxing on the same night at the same time. But like he seems.
Which sport am I watching again?
Yeah, he's everywhere, and doesn't always know what he's watching. But mostly good. I haven't heard anyone yell at him recently. But these other two judges makes me curious to go look at what decisions they were involved in the rest of the night, because there seemed to be a decent amount of 10-8s tonight.
Yeah, so I'll tell you this. Going back to what you're saying, and I'll also tie in the commentary team again. A couple of years ago, they made a push for judging and judges to be more liberal with the 10-8 system. I see them spamming it a lot more these days, and I call it spamming because I think that they're very quick to give like a grappling dominant round. It's easy in boxing to tell what a 10-8 round is. Generally, it's from a knockdown. In MMA, if you have a dominant round in stand-up, it's kind of easy to call it a 10-8. You had the guy in trouble, ref was close to getting involved. A knockdown doesn't guarantee it, but it helps. But you're starting to see more of these. A guy got positionally handled on the ground, and they're starting to give 10-8 rounds. If the commentary team, they were talking about those weren't 10-8 rounds. I believe they were referring, and you were referring to the 5th round, right? That was the 10-8 round in question where he got
two judges gave it 10-8.
Yeah, so the commentary team, I think led by Rogan, was saying, look, I don't see that as a 10-8 round, but that's the problem with MMA scoring, is that how do you give the same score to Jan as you would either of the other rounds he won or the ones 1 and 3 that you and I have Israel Adesanya winning. So I don't necessarily agree with that. If you look at the stats, it actually probably lends itself a little bit better to a 10-8 round. Jan outlanded him 28-12 with significant strikes, and overall strikes was 64-16. And then the final 2.5 minutes, he was positionally dominant. So I personally didn't see it. I like to think that if someone gets a 10-8, it's because they were actually in danger of losing in MMA. That's kind of like the old adage. I mean, if you go back and look at,
I like that old adage. That's the one I like. I like Frankie Edgar versus the first round. What's his name again? Maynard. That in the second fight, that first round, to me, so I guess some people wanted to give that round to 10-7 even.
Yeah, I mean,
survived it. There was like
no better candidate.
But I think I'll let you finish. I'm sorry that I interrupted you, but I think that old adage is the best. Like, were you about to be finished? Okay, you survived good, but you really lost the round by a lot,
Yeah. Dana White said the same thing. He's like, it's because you got your butt kicked in the round. And for anyone who's watching now who may be newer or may not remember, there was a fight that was Dan Henderson versus Shogun in 2011, their first fight. And there were 2 rounds that were awfully one-sided, one in each guy's favor, and there were no 10-8. So back then, I was like, where are the 10-8s here? Round 3 and round 5, I think. And that was an example of how hard it was to get a 10-8 round. I think it's really easy to determine a 10-8 round. And I think that position, unfortunately for grappling, the rule system is not geared towards grappling. I think that them being more liberal with 10-8 rounds has tried to even the gap, because it's hard to be like a one-dimensional or a grappling-based fighter, predominantly grappling, and win fights at the top, let alone get 10-8s. I think that was done, and the unofficial side effect of it was that you can take someone down, ruin them with positioning, do no damage, not come close to a submission, and get a 10-8 round. I don't know how I feel about that. I think that's just the breaks, and I'm a grappler myself.
I mean, yeah. So that's sort of what happened. Like Jan was active, so that's why those stats look so one-sided, because he stayed active. But until he didn't care about losing position, which was the last 4 seconds of round 5. Until he didn't care about losing position, he didn't go into mount and didn't start crushing him. You know, and so those 4 seconds were 10-8 round. But
yes,
yeah, but other than that, like the fact is that strikes on the ground, we can go and find the handful of fights where someone's knocked someone out, in guard, or in half guard or something like that, where they were way more focused on position, because Jan was way more focused on position and he was getting work in. He wasn't really trying to finish, to be honest, until those last 4 seconds.
Not at all.
So, I mean, I don't like the 10-8s there, because now you have a lot of 10-8s, and like now every fight would probably have a 10-8 in it. As soon as someone gets position, Overeem, I can't remember against who, he won a fight where he used 2 rounds to wrestle, maybe like 3 or 4 fights ago, and those would have been 10-8.
Sakai or Rosenstruck.
I think it was, yeah. And those would have been, well, he didn't win one of those, but
yeah, right.
It was probably Sakai, and those would have been 10-8 rounds. That would have that could have very heavily shifted what was going on. So yeah, that's too much to give that a 10-8. I'm not angry about it or anything like that. Why not? Especially with what I said, like in relation to, and you're not supposed to do this though, but in relation to the rest of the rounds, like those were much more dominant, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about unless you have anything else technical about the fight, let's talk about where each fighter goes from here. Did you want to point anything else out?
Sure. Just to end it on that subject, I really hope that they fix this incongruency on what's happening with 10-8 rounds, just so it's a little bit more clear to the viewer. I can usually tell when they're going to give an unjust 10-8 round. I didn't see that coming. So I hope that Big John McCarthy or someone else involved with the sport takes over and puts their foot down and says, look, this is with the new system of scoring. Let's be a little bit more clear, because before they weren't giving them out. Now I think you and I agree that they're giving them out too much.
Yeah, and then let's button this one up, because we're meandering, but I'll button it up with the ones that I knew there were 10-8s is Tim Elliott had some 10-8 rounds by just one judge, just Chris Lee, and then Askar Askarov was another. That was the only one. Sal D'Amato was a judge in all these fights. The only 10-8 round he gave that I haven't looked at all of his, but of these 3 that I knew possibly had wrestling 10-8 rounds, Sal D'Amato gave it to that one. Okay, let's go to let's go right to Jan. This is actually where they go from here is pretty easy, I think. There's not really a question. So Jan is probably going to go and fight Glover unless there's a coronavirus issue or an injury, right? So let's just get like initial thoughts on that, or if you have a dissenting opinion.
Sure. No, I'd agree with that. Glover was the backup for this fight. UFC's in the lovely situation where they have a 41-year-old guy fighting a 38-year-old guy at the top of the division. Sure, they're really excited about promoting the heck out of that, so they can say, yeah, one fight later, this old guy might lose. But it's going to be an awesome fight. It's going to be an awesome fight.
It's happening a lot, and not just in MMA, but in obviously Tom Brady is the most famous of that. LeBron James, like our like nutrition and training and stuff has gotten so advanced that I think our primes are moving up. Where it was 28 to 33. I'm just shooting out numbers for an athlete, right? It's starting to get much higher. So now you're starting to get these smarter people that are a lot more healthy. So, Jan today could beat up Jan from 4 years ago.
He's a much better fighter.
And Glover came in, tearing people apart, but he was tearing people apart that were lower competition, right? And then he had some issues, and now it looks great again. And I'd hate to say it. I mean, forgive me, Jan Blachowicz, I love you, but another fight. This is another fight where I'm like, well, how does he win? How does he win? Glover is essentially, they're almost the same thing, except Glover's better on the ground. And, the only thing is that I think that I guess, let's say their power is very close, but I think Jan is more likely to take a Glover punch than Glover a Jan punch. But who knows? Like what we saw with in the fight with Ryan Bader, Glover got caught there and then was able to finish Bader. So that's Jan versus Glover is a great fight, even if it's 41 versus 37. I think 41 versus 37 is the new 34 versus 31. So
it's gonna be a great fight. I think with Jan's timing, he's going to be jabbing and moving in and out for his like 1-1-2 combinations, and then you're going to have Glover. I think he's going to try to get it to the ground like he does in every fight. And I favor him if he's on top on the ground. But I think I actually like the matchup for Jan. I think that if he fights the way he's been fighting, patient, good timing. Very, very keen on his defense, not throwing any lazy or sloppy offense. I think it would be his fight to lose.
You know what? I can't get the Gustafsson fight out of my head, and against a guy that can wrestle him down, I don't know. I don't know that Jan's going to get up from Glover doing that if it happens.
You're quite right.
Jan looks flat-footed. He looks like he's grabbing every feint, at least in the Adesanya fight. He looks like he doesn't have very much head movement, but he seems to have the timing down. He seems to have distance down, and especially these last few fights to get through. It's a great fight. And Jan, to his credit, is like, bring on the next guy. Bring on the next guy. Like, he seems to just want to fight the best guys, and he's the UFC champion. UFC lightweight champion. I wish that we got to see him against John Jones or Cormier or something like that.
Oh man, that would be great.
Yeah, but we're just not gonna. It doesn't look like that's gonna happen, So Jan versus Glover is a good fight, and it's one of the very few obvious fights we've had at light heavyweight in a while. So let's move on to Israel. Now Israel's problem is, so he gets beat, And he didn't look terrible. He just, he has a big wrestling hole in his game. But he sort of has more or less cleared out the middleweight division. What do you got next for him?
You and I kind of came to the conclusion that if he goes back to middleweight, because we were talking a little bit with the air of if he had won this fight, what was next? The options, the world was his oyster, because 85 would basically mean that he has to fight the winner of Paulo Costa and Whitaker, two guys he destroyed in the second round. It finished in the second round, destroyed them every second before then. I see that that's what it is, and that's what he was alluding to, which is that he's going to have to go down there and rule with I think he said black iron fist. And he was also talking about wanting a fresh contender with Cannonier if that guy can build himself back up. Yeah,
Darren Tilton. I say Costa doesn't get the fight. I would like to see the Robert Whitaker fight again. He beat Robert Whitaker in a way that I was extremely surprised by. And Robert Whitaker was someone that surprised me coming up, and I became a believer in Robert Whitaker. But it's one of those things, and we're going to talk about Jan versus Aljamain Sterling in a second. But it's one of those things where you're like, oh, I would like to see that guy get a second chance, right? And so in the context of, we'll just jump to that fight now. But in the context of Aljamain Sterling and Peter Yan, Aljamain lost because he probably came in with a bad strategy, or I believe that Aljamain with this experience has a better chance in the rematch. I think the same thing about Whitaker. Like he's a smart fighter, and I would like to see him now that he actually had some ring time with Adesanya. Now, do I call Whitaker the favorite in that fight? I don't. Do I call Aljamain Sterling the favorite in a rematch? I don't, but I'll probably bet on him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Talking about Sterling, I actually had him winning the first 2 rounds. Close, but I had him winning the first 2 rounds, and then I had him losing, and momentum was not in his way in the 3rd and 4th round. 2 judges had it 29-28 Jan after 3, and 1 had it 29-28 Sterling. I think what he was able to do in that fight was just the element of surprise. It almost seemed like he was they were attached by like a rope, and every time they got 5 feet away, it was propelling Sterling to be back in Jan's face. I thought he was doing really well there. That's a strategy that will work one time, by the way. That won't work in multiple fights. So
what won't work?
The fact that he was just crowding Jan recklessly and glued to him and throwing like punches. I mean, Jan's defense was really tight. I think that Jan now knows that Sterling's best chance to hang with him is to be glued to him and stuck to him and throwing stuff at him, even if it doesn't land, even if it's just to distract. And I think that in the next fight, Jan would use a more movement-based approach so that Sterling can't put hands on him. And that doesn't necessarily mean hit. That just means grab, touch. I think he would avoid that in the next fight. But I just don't know when we're going to see that after he, it looked like he had a concussion to me. I don't want to see him turn around in 3 months. 6 months might not be enough time.
So I actually had Sterling round 1 and 2 also, but it was a little bit, I guess it was a little bit like the way I was seeing the Adesanya fight before Blachowicz started wrestling, and a little bit the way that I had Conor McGregor winning round 1 against Poirier, right? It was like, okay, you won that round, you were more active, or you in the case of Sterling, I gave him both rounds, you were more active, but it seemed like the other fighter, his technical ability was going to come ahead, which is dangerous because those in each of these, in all 3 of those situations, you really don't want to give up a round, or 2, So yeah, I gave Sterling both rounds too, but I mean, he clearly was going to have an adrenaline dump. He was clearly excited to be there.
Yeah.
Too excited to be there and just couldn't keep up that pace. And I'll have to say that in that first round when he was at that pace, I was like, well, Longo, that he comes from a good camp. Sterling's Sterling's a lot better than his run from the last, his last few fights. He's become this real smart, focused fighter. So I was like, well, maybe he can go nearly 25 like this, or maybe the idea is to start wrestling later, but he looked lazy on his takedowns, and the striking was nice, but Peter Yan, most of them were, a lot of them at least were, on the arms and stuff. So I had to give it. I felt like I had to give it to Sterling because he was more active. It looked like he was getting broken down, and that's where we were up until the illegal strike.
Yeah, man. So I thought very similar. They gave him the first 2 rounds, like we said, and I thought that he was, he wasn't quite setting things up organically. It was more just distraction type stuff. And if it landed, great. But if not, it was just going to give him the split second to get in on the legs, to maybe land a clean punch while he was just throwing to throw. And ultimately, I thought it was enough to win him some rounds. And I was thinking to myself, man, if he can hold up, this is like an incredible grinding pace. And you don't usually see that type of grind in the stand-up, but he was doing it. And it started to wear on him. Actually, coincidentally, after round 2, his corner said, like, look, you got to breathe. You got to look for your openings better. And that meant he was going to stand in the pocket or at striking range with Jan. And it started going south real fast, and they started fatiguing. I think he needed to, while it was good advice, I think that the strategy he was using was working because Jan wasn't getting a moment to break. He was going to have to catch him coming in, which was also a possibility. Ultimately, it was an interesting showing for Sterling. I don't think he can. I think he needs to come up with a new strategy in the next fight. But that was really heartbreaking to see the way this ended.
Yeah, we'll talk about.
Getting a lot of hate.
We'll get into the disqualification. I want to ask you, as the lifelong wrestler on the stream, the way I saw it, like Sterling's takedowns were bad. It wasn't Jan's great. There may be a couple where Jan's takedown defense really did it, but Sterling, as athletic and as fast as he looked at the beginning too, when he was going for takedowns, they looked like telegraphed, easy, simple, like nothing special. Like same with Jan Blachowicz in the first 3 rounds, right? Like I mean, you're not going to take down a pro like that knows you're going after takedowns.
Right.
What did you think about? And I think he went 1 for 14 or something like that. I think that's what he was. Like I think there were 14 attempts, and he got 1, and it was where Jan jumped back up. I don't know if you have that in front of you.
It was worse than that. 1 of 17.
1 of 17. Yeah.
You're right, though. Terrible.
So why don't you talk about as much as you can remember, because we haven't rewatched this fight yet.
Sure.
It's weird too when you see a guy like super athletic and super quick and super fast. Because I'm not even saying when he got tired, the takedowns looked lazy. I think his takedown attempts looked lazy at the beginning too. Maybe lazy is not the right word, but like uncommitted.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong there. I think we've kind of established, and I think we're in agreement that he was kind of filled with like a nervous energy. And when he's just throwing just to throw and distract, it's like one of those, like I put my hand up and then I go in on your legs at the exact same time. In wrestling, we would clap right in front of the guy's face and then go in on his legs. That's a good distracting move. A vet will never be out of position enough, especially a champion with good takedown defense will never be out of position enough for that to work too many times. And so I think that he was trying to do those types of little cheapo moves and get in on the hips, and Jan was just not having it just because it's in his style to not be that out of position. I think he was more just surprised that, man, this guy's work rate is crazy. And what's he getting out of it? What's he doing? Yeah. It was a good way to score some points, but against a guy that good, it just wasn't going to lead to either like hurting him. I mean, he wasn't even cut, and Sterling threw 260 punches in that fight. 230 were significant. Landed a decent amount, but they were all on the shield, Yeah. So I think that it didn't open up his wrestling. He does that sometimes, but he usually gets in so deep on these people that he's able to land like that spammy takedown. Ultimately, Jan is I learned even more about him. The fact that he was dealing with that, I was impressed. If Sterling could have kept it up for the whole fight, he probably would have won. And if he could have brought it back in the 5th round, he might have even won.
Yeah.
But
so let's talk about the disqualification. I mean, it was one of the most egregious things I've ever seen. Supposedly, they were saying Khabib was, heard in Russian that it was all right to kick or whatever. Whatever the reasons, it doesn't really matter.
Oh my God,
he was down, and it's weird too because I think Sterling was a little bit better than he was acting on the ground. I think he's concussed. Don't get me wrong, but I think you're trying to make this decision too after you've taken such a tough knee. Whether it's smart, like for your health to continue.
Oh my God, yeah, I'm so glad he didn't continue.
Yeah, so was I, and man, I mean, I wish it was even a little. Let's do this. You said there was another close knee that I didn't remember. You put that on Twitter. Where was the other close knee?
It was 2nd or 3rd round. Similar scenario. We saw a similar situation play out a few times where Aljamain is either head below his waist standing, or he was on his knees and arms outstretched, kind of in that you've sprawled on me position, but I'm not going to bail on it. That we see Covington in once in a while too. So what usually winds up happening there is the guy who does the sprawl, the guy who is sprawled, who's on top, separates, and he gets up first, and the other guy gets up second out of kind of self-interest. However, what happened there was you can time it so that you take your weight off the guy, and as he stands up, you blast him. And I thought he hit Sterling in like the neck, chin area, but the commentary team were like, "Oh, nice timing and knee by Jan, hit him right in the chest." And I was like, "Man, that was like that." What you've had a couple scenarios like that play out in the sport. Anderson Silva did it to Chael one time when Chael was kind of on the ground, and he did a hard knee on the chest in the rematch. And then they were like, "Was that illegal? Did that hit the face?" When Jan did that, I noticed it very much, and I was like, "Man, that's one of those very close calls, because had the guy not moved the way he lined up to strike, and had the guy not moved the way he expected him to, it would have been a blatant illegal move. And then what happened? He did the same thing later, and it was blatantly illegal."
Yeah, held his head and everything. So
pulled him into it. Jeez.
Let's talk about so what happened according to the rules, and that's fine. At first on Twitter, I was saying, hey, it should be like and there's a reason I don't think this now, but on Twitter I said, hey, it should be like losing the title on the scales, right? Like it should almost be, there is, Jan loses the title, but it's hard for me to say Sterling wins it. But then what does the UFC do? They were like, well, Sterling was getting his ass beat, not give Sterling a rematch, which I think he at least deserves if he didn't get his opportunity to do something in the next 2 rounds. You never know what could have happened, right? So is it he's obviously a paper champion, but is it the right decision to give him the belt?
Based on the way it works out, I mean, technically, I'll say yes. Technically it is. Is it a situation where he's not going to be really recognized as the champion? Yes, especially with the way the match was going. You can't even argue, well, he was on his way to winning because momentum was against him, although again, it was a competitive fight. Let's go with your theory of like it's kind of like leaving it on the scales. Can you kind of give me a little bit more information on that? Because if the champ misses weight, he's not eligible to win the title. Even if he wins, it's so then you have a guy who won the fight, but isn't the champion because he missed weight. But it is eligible for the guy who made weight. So help me understand your analogy.
So what I'm saying is that you lose it. So let's say the guy that misses weight loses it on the scales and then wins the fight. He's not the champion. Is what I'm saying, right? So now the belt no one's holding the belt. So my thought is that, maybe this is what I thought last night when I was just on Twitter. So, the better choice is that no one holds the belt. But then what ends up happening is the UFC doesn't have to make the rematch. They could still just go, well, we're just going to have Jan fight TJ, the winner of TJ and whoever, Dominic or what's his name. And I don't think that's fair. I think actually Sterling, even though the momentum was changing, right? You and I still had Sterling 2-1, right? And Sterling gets the chance to change something in those last 2 rounds. So to me, and it was 100% Peter Yan's fault, right? Yeah. So to me, it actually is the right decision. Let's just, no one's calling him the real champion, not even him. He doesn't think that way.
Didn't even took the belt off.
So this actually gives us the fight again, and this is why we can sort of talk about this now. This is why I say there's no way I think that they're gonna, that Sterling will be the favorite after where he was at the fight at that moment. But I would bet on him if I got this is one of those fights where you might get plus 200 or plus 250 or something on it. Yeah. So I don't think that Jan was surprised by what happened, right? He knew that Sterling's super athletic. He knew he was going to have to weather some, that athleticism storm that we'll see from, certain guys, right? So Peter Yan might make a few adjustments, but doesn't make that many, right? Sterling has time now. He has time logged in a championship fight. He's in a great camp with great training partners, and they can make those adjustments. Like he's going to get that second try that where now you could see that this thing didn't work, we need to make adjustments, and you get the immediate try. Unfortunately, he's probably concussed, right? So, that's going to be a little bit longer, or it should be, at least if he's smart.
Yeah.
So that's why I would say that's the way I think the odds would come out. I would say Sterling is a live underdog in that case.
I'd say so. I mean, he might even be able to use a similar strategy with a couple tweaks, like hyper aggression with a couple tweaks, maybe a little bit more aggressive with trying to take the back. I mean, did you see how many times he went out of position? Like he would just give up his back to Jan because he was like throwing his weight forward like a magnet.
I'll never understand this strategy.
Oh my gosh, right? Come on. It's like you're going so hard at him that all of a sudden he has your back for no reason other than you like went straight at him. It was so strange.
I thought he was trying to I thought that he was going to do that. What it looked like to me, the first time I saw it, then it just looked silly. That he was trying to, go, you could drop for the leg when they wrap
forward roll into like the knee bar.
Roll into like the knee bar, or use it to roll into a takedown. But then it started looking funny and lazy, and then he was like spinning. He was trying
to spin elbow off the back take clinch. It was so strange.
He was too excited. That nervous energy was very clear. Yeah,
so. I got to rewatch that fight. It seemed very entertaining at the time. I might be cringing a little bit on the rematch, but the fact is that it was something that had a positive effect for him overall, because it led to him getting some rounds. One judge had him winning, and also he was stifling. The biggest part was that he was stifling Jan's game, at least for 10 to 15 minutes. Although Jan was coming on stronger, I'm sure Aljamain would have had a second win.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the other championship fight here. We'll keep this one short, since all her fights are short. And it's really not because I don't like women's fighting. It's just that she's so dominant. So I'm just going to say it.
Go on.
I don't want to see Nunes fight anyone else, except for Valentina Shevchenko. I want to see that fight again. Give Shevchenko the chance. She's dominating 125. She's arguably the best kickboxer in the UFC. All respect to Izzy. That's, we could question those. Bring her back up, and let's just see this fight. That's the only person. So if Nunes decidedly beats her in the eyes of Chris Sarda, then she's the super champ or whatever. And I don't care that she has 2 wins against her. We know that other fight was really close. I think Nunes is actually better, so I would still favor her. But I just need to see that fight, and I get it's at 135, and this is a 145. There's no one in the division at 145, so I'm glad that she can keep defending it. Dana White said she can defend it. It's time for the Shevchenko and Nunes match. It's been a couple years.
I don't disagree with you. I kind of have been pushing against that when you brought it up in recent times, just because I don't like to see, because when it's 2-0 in a series and then you give the other person a chance, then what happens? It's 2-1, and the person with the 1 has the most recent victory. So it's a weird one. What was that, like Marquez with Pacquiao, or Quentin Jackson with Vanderlei? So
it would be that with Holloway and Jan, right? So
Holloway and Volkanovski,
sorry.
Yeah. Right.
That's why I didn't want to do that. But see, I'm okay.
You want to avoid it. You want to avoid that situation if you can. However, you're totally right. They're at that point. I mean, literally, Amanda Nunes has beaten every female champion in UFC history from weight 125 and up. That's pretty big. And she has no one left, and she just crushed Anderson. Not only she crushed her standing, took her down, beat her with an inverted triangle into an arm. I mean, talk about being like leaps ahead with technical wizardry. She murdered her. Yeah, and even the broadcast booth. Yeah, broadcast. All right, just to wrap it up, broadcast booth goes, "Who's left?" And then Annex, like, I hate to say it, but Valentina, and they're like, "Yeah, but she's at 125." He's like, "So now she'll fight at 35."
Yeah,
give her a chance to become a champ. She's amazing anyway.
Yeah, and to be honest, let's say Valentina beats her at 35. Let him fight at 45.
Oh my God. Can you imagine if Nunes loses to Valentina at 35 and then she's left with the 145-pound belt to fight once a year, once every 2 years? I mean,
yeah, but let Valentina do that. How awesome would that be? Valentina goes, "I'll give you the match, but at 45."
That would be amazing, actually.
That would be great. I would love it. That Valentina's, and Valentina's actually, she's been finishing lately, hasn't she? I was going to say one of Valentina's.
Other than Maya, she pretty much finishes people, and she has a fight coming up against Jessica Andrade, who is it's going to be a tough fight. Although there's a clear path to victory, Valentina has to show up, be on point, and she can finish Andrade too. She's not unfinishable.
Yeah, and she didn't finish. Joanna either, which is, I mean, it's amazing that the two of the three best kickboxers, let's not rank them, are two women, like technically, I think, because Joanna gets a lot of credit for not getting knocked out there because Shevchenko was clearly the bigger woman. And I mean, that's going to be Joanna's. I mean, Joanna's, when we look back on her career, it's going to be that she didn't get knockouts because she gets through a lot. They just don't knock.
Fighter, though.
Yeah. So Valentina. So yeah. Let's just end it there. How about that? I mean, I think this is clear. I don't want to see any other fights until I see Shevchenko again. If Shevchenko loses another close one, I'll shut up. Even if I score with her.
Yeah. No. I mean, I think that if you have to keep Amanda Nunes busy, I mean, she'd been off for 9 months. If you want to keep her busy and you don't want to just give her completely winnable fights, you start by giving her Shevchenko again. Now would be a good time. It's been a few fights. I mean, it's definitely been a few fights between that they each have had, and they've both gone on to do historic things since they fought last. So yeah, it would be great.
Okay, let's move on to we can skip the opener. So let's because I'd rather talk about Cruz anyway. I'm disappointed, but I want to before we get to the prelims, let's talk about Makhachev and Dober. I just want to. I'm gonna we'll be short on this one too. I'm gonna let you talk on this one mostly. But I didn't watch Drew Dober fights before this. Like I tried to watch some last 2 or 3 fights. My memory is that Drew Dober actually had pretty good takedown defense, especially recently, and then got his power to get his power got through lately. He looked like a beginner against Islam. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we've both done our share of jiu-jitsu. There's a rule. If you're on your back and you're flat, then you can't be offensive. I would disagree because you can probably be working your triangle finish, or your Kimura sweep. But yeah, the basic rule is if you're flat, if your shoulders are pinned to the mat in jiu-jitsu, you're not able to be offensive. You're not able to get out. You have to go to a hip. He just refused to do it. And he's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. I don't understand. I'm not going to say that Makhachev was so good that he was keeping him there. I actually put that a little bit on Dober more than I give Islam credit for it, although Islam got the finish with the crossbody arm triangle there, which is very rare.
So they were calling it the Von Fluke choke, and I actually didn't see the replay. I was holding the baby at the time. I mean, was that a Von Fluke choke?
It was based on the position he had it. He was stuck in half guard, so his right leg is trapped, Makhachev. And his left leg is the leg that's out. He was a crossbody, kind of head under the arm, and his arm right around the head. So when he had that, it was a cross between a Von Flue and an arm triangle. And all you have to do.
I mean, the shoulder on the carotid is what got it, right?
Yes.
Was the shoulder on the carotid? Oh, I mean, yeah, that's close enough. I mean, I'm weird because you do the Von Fluke choke because someone holds the headlock, right?
Yep.
And I'm a white belt, so I'm not telling anyone that I know what I'm doing, but I try to get my arm under, especially on people a little bit smaller. Like I will actually try to put their arm over my neck so that I can lock up the Von Fluke choke sometimes. And, I enjoy seeing it when I see that. And when I see the Ezekiel from the bottom are my two favorite, like, what I like to call them are white belt desperation subs.
Yeah.
I'm in the position I like. So I love to see that. I love to see that. I mean, if he's in half guard, I think it technically isn't. But if if it was because the shoulder was dug into the carotid in position, then it's essentially the same idea.
Yeah, it was Yvonne flew from 45 degrees back towards the guard rather than side mount. I call it 45 degrees because the leg farther down the body was tied in into the half guard. There's just so many ways to get out of that. I don't care. That should only work if a guy is much bigger than you. Like skill for skill, if you had me in that type of position, you being 30 pounds heavier than me, that's an example where you should be able to overpower me and get that move. Other than that, you scoot your hips away, you get on a hip. It didn't make sense.
So so I mean, that left obviously, and you tweeted about it too, left a bad taste in your mouth. There's part of me that thinks that it's, he had just been being beaten. There was an element of Khabib, against Michael Johnson. Like you're just, you have nothing for this guy.
Broken. You're right.
But he was flat on his back from the beginning, though. Like in the first round when they got taken down, he stayed flat on his back. I mean, maybe I'm giving Islam a little too much credit, but it's almost like Dober goes, I have nothing for this guy. I've been able to stuff all these takedowns in my career, and this guy's just owning me at it.
As good as Dober has been, he's just shown that he still is the same type of fighter, unfortunately, that is vulnerable on his back against a power wrestler, power grappler, and that his stand-up hasn't diversified enough. He's got a lot of muscle on his frame. It makes him look shorter than he is. But he doesn't have the it's always like the flicking right hook, kind of a left straight, left cross straight, and he lives by those, and he probably is a better fighter than that, but he is a victim to, well, if it works, I'm just going to use it to death.
So Islam mentioned Tony Ferguson, and is that the next fight for him? A good name. Now Tony Ferguson might be done. This is sort of like the situation. We're going to hop Dominic Cruz in just a minute. It's sort of like the situation Dominic Cruz was at. Like, okay, you fought a murderer's row. You've lost 2 champions. Let's give you, an up and comer or a riser. Is that the fight to do? Islam versus Tony Ferguson. Now Tony can prove it against a young up and comer, and then start getting big fights again. Or let's jump Islam. Some spots.
I mean, if he loses that fight, you basically cut the cord with him, because Islam was number 14 in the UFC rankings going into this. I believe that was what they flashed. I'm, as a fan of Tony Ferguson, I don't like it when he continues to get high risk, low reward fights. But yeah, I don't, he has something to prove, and what way to prove something than in a high risk, low reward fight?
Well, Islam, you got to think Islam on Tuesday will be, in the top 10. I wouldn't quite put him above Dariush quite yet, but above Felder for sure. These guys,
they're similar in the rankings then. So you probably have Ferguson somewhere around the back half of the top 5, mid top 10, like 6 to 10. And so that would put them, it's a good fight. I think that's springboarding him off of Tony is the intention there, but it'll still be a good fight. It'll be awesome.
Okay, let's talk about Dominic Cruz, and then I do want to hit some of these. We're almost at an hour. I do want to hit some of these smaller fights like Ask Rob and stuff, because those are probably future championship fights.
Sure.
Dominic Cruz. So I think this is probably the fight that you and I called the best, aside from Nunes. Is that, hey, that's great. Kenny's the favorite. That's a little bit weird for us, but we think Dominic Cruz is going to find a way to pull this one out, and that's exactly what happened. I would say, just feeling wise, is that I think he won the fight. I think he pulled it out, but that does not look like the kind of guy that I think could be fighting top 3-4 guys right now and winning.
Yeah. Did you see it a little bit as Cruz was fighting the same way he used to, but now he was having to kind of force it a little bit more? Did you see it that way too?
I did. He's looked like a little bit closer. Like maybe it was because he's taking more risk. Cruz is a lot like, I'm not like cutting him down by comparing him to the women fighters. it's like his legacy is going to be that he wasn't a finisher, and that all his legacy is going to be his injuries, unfortunately. And then as a as someone that opened up the 35 division and stuff like that, like historically good. But his legacy at the end is he has all these weird movements that are hard to capture and hard to get. But the fact is he never finished guys really, and that's what I saw here. I for a moment there, Kenny was even getting a bead on his awkward movements and stuff, and I love seeing it. I was excited to see that old Dominic Cruz. I have these memories of watching him fight. Early. Not early in his career, but in his little championship, the injuries really caught him, and it was, to me, it was a fun fight. It was always, when people were complaining about those smaller divisions, like people still do. To me, it was like, oh, this is interesting. Like a guy that fighting like that. It seems like he just invented this style in his garage, and it kept working. And it worked tonight or last night, but I just don't think it doesn't look like championship material right now.
Yeah, I think that his next fight will tell us what he's done. Ultimately, in the lighter weights,
against Hahn?
Sorry. Oh my God, no! I hope not. maybe Dillashaw, but honestly, he'll probably get like a Pedro Munoz or a Rivera. You're 35 years old in a 135-pound division. That, generally speaking, you don't have too many like Yoel Romero types at those weight classes because it's literally a product of youth and athleticism. And this is a guy who's had like 3-4 different knee surgeries and also plantar fasciitis. So that's going to cause you to lose a step. So that's why I think he was still trying to fight the same way, but it was a little bit more labored. He looked a little tired at the end because it wasn't coming as naturally. He has this like beautiful figure 8 type movement, and he does a lot of like what I call like 90-degree movements. So he goes hard left and then straight forward, or back hard and then step to the other direction. And he does that a lot. That's a cornerstone of good footwork. However, when you start to lose a step, that's when you wind up getting caught like he did against Cejudo. Again, time off, but he was able to make Kenny, a young kid, whiff using the same weapons he's always used. I thought that was impressive. I thought it was a good performance. I didn't see it as a split decision. I thought it was, I think, 2-1, if I remember correctly. I wasn't in fear that I wasn't suspecting that a judge was going to give it to Kenny based on normal rules. I didn't think they were that close. I thought he looked better than Kenny.
Yeah, I would say what you said about Cruz is right. Like if he loses a step with that style, that's absolutely true. What's in Cruz's favor, and his attitude's not in his favor. So this may mean he doesn't make these adjustments, that he thinks he's the exact same. But
Yeah.
In baseball, Mariano Rivera is a closer for the Yankees, and through the vast majority of his career, you knew what was coming, and it was just speed, and no one can handle it, and they only had to be there for an inning. And Mariano Rivera is the greatest closer in history. When he lost a little velocity, he was older. He actually added a few wrinkles to his game, and he stayed as an elite closer. I feel the same way that Clayton Kershaw will do the same thing, but as a starting pitcher. He was a velocity guy, had a bunch of pitches. He's lost some velocity, so now he has to play with the other pitches. You know what I mean? He's a smart, intelligent guy, high-level athlete.
You have to adapt.
I want to say the same for Cruz, for the simple fact that while the knees have been torn apart, his style and all the time off that he's had, he's not had the concussions. He's not taken the beatdowns at all. In fact, I really can't think of Cejudo? I really can't think of a fight where he's just got his ass kicked, maybe early in his career.
Really, just Garbrandt and Cejudo were the ones that he took damage. The Cejudo fight was the first TKO KO loss of his career.
So exactly. So, for what he gives up in the knees, if he does, right, he's not giving up here.
Correct.
And if he could just take it down a notch and be a little bit more humble, and really look at the step that he lost, that we think he lost.
Objectively, you're right.
Yeah, he can make those adjustments because he's a really smart fighter, and there's no reason that he can't add something or become a tiny bit more orthodox, or become a tiny bit more crazy, or do something with distance that I don't think that he can make that adjustment to now continue on the next 5 years. Because let's say, what we said earlier, let's say that his knees are fine, like the surgeries were great and he's 100% healed. In the past, that hasn't been the case. But nowadays, like ACL tears, the worst part of it is you lose a year. Like in football, you lose a year, but all these guys are coming back looking good. So maybe that's the case with him. It would become, it'd be meaningful for the kind of adjustments he makes. But when you win a fight and it's that close, and then you challenge a PR guy for charity, which you're number one. I didn't even know who the hell he was talking about. I had to wait for like Ariel Helwani to tweet what it was, right? I thought it was a YouTuber. And number two, you would never been a headliner. Like what charity? You wouldn't headline the charity bout. You know what I mean? You'd be the second fight on it or something, especially against a non-YouTube guy. For him in that mindset to call that out, even Joe Rogan was awkward, and they're friends. Like they share the booth together. Yeah, it means that maybe your mind's not on it anymore. Like you're not focused on getting the next fight and getting one back on Garbrandt or trying to get Cejudo back in. So maybe mentally he's not there. So mentally, potentially, like his potential and the lack of damage he's taken in his career, I think there's a chance that he could build back up and be a top 5 guy again. But the excuses he made with the referee, and he keeps fucking talking about it, and then challenging a PR guy when you're a professional fighter.
Maybe he wants to fight Keith Peterson next if the Hans Molenkamp fight falls through.
You should fight Keith Peterson, but after like 4 shots of whiskey. And maybe mentally he's not. I actually like Dominic Cruz in the booth. He did get in trouble. People forget this, but he did get in trouble for just stealing from Jack Slack once early in his announcing career. But
Jack Slack, me too. He's amazing.
Yeah, he's great. And but I like him in the booth. And for a guy that's so unorthodox, he actually does like understand the wrestling and stuff very well, and explains
incredible knowledge of the game. You're right about that.
And so,
what do you want to see next from him? Tell me. What do you want to see next? If you had to pick his next fight, Dillashaw. Munoz?
No, not Dillashaw. I think Munoz is the best, considering what what we talked about, where his mind is.
Awesome. Winnable fight too. Winnable fight. Guys are the same age there. Munoz is like 33, 34.
Yeah.
And I'd agree with that.
Yeah, why not? And it'll be to be honest, that's not even a headliner for a fight night card. That's a co-main event, Yep. So let's there's so many fights.
You want to squeeze in the Askarov versus potentially Joe Benavidez' last fight? There was a 10-8 there we can discuss. You want to sneak that in?
There's so much to talk about. That what happened in the Tim Elliott fight we could talk about.
Did you hear what happened in Tim Elliott's fight? That he started yelling. He said, "So you're a woman beater?" Did you hear that?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. We can talk about that. There's 10-8 there. And Nzechukwu against Olberg. So City Kickboxing, Cara France won, but Carlos Olberg, he doesn't have the adrenaline down. Let's talk about, before we get into we'll finish with Askar. I just want to be really disappointed in the Rakic Thiago Santos fight. Okay. I guess that was a situation where they just respected one another too much, and maybe Santos is his first fight with his 37 knee surgeries. Is that what happened?
But same difference.
Second fight,
might as well have been his first, because the first one was a non-event. He landed like one punch or elbow real early, and then he got murdered for 2 rounds.
Yeah. So maybe Santos is. Maybe that's he needs to get his head back in. Maybe the injuries were too much that he couldn't get back on. And Rakic, I guess, was just too safe. I really like Rakic. I think besides Glover, I think he really had an argument to start campaigning for a title shot. But no one's going to remember that fight. And he had the nerve to go talk to Dana after. He walked right up to Dana.
I saw that.
You can just see Dana's face. He was like,
"Yeah, Rakic is probably like, you like that performance? I'm going to make you so much money. Let me headline the next pay-per-view."
The thumbs up.
Yeah, that means stop talking to me. Stop talking to me. Stop thinking you just did something good.
Yeah, I really like Rakic, though. I wish that I thought that was going to be a great opener. So let's close with it was very deep in the prelims, which is unfortunate. I think UFC doesn't do themselves a service, or the lighter weights here. But this was legitimately a title eliminator.
Oh yeah.
For Askar Askarov, and man, I mean, Dominic Cruz should have almost been on the pay-per-view, and this should have probably led the prelims, but it wasn't even the second prelim. It was also a catch weight, so I guess I should point that out. So that's a big deal.
Yep.
But Askar Askarov, relative unknown, is probably going to fight for the title. What do you think about that fight?
Yeah, I'll tell you this. Ever since Benavidez lost the final, the second Demetrius Johnson fight, basically every fight he has had since then has been you beat him and you get the title shot opportunity for people. Pettis beat him by a split decision. He didn't get it. And other than that, he won every other fight. And then he finally got, when there was a new champion, he got 2 title shots. So it showed Benavidez, again, 36 years old, in a lighter weight, coming off 2 painful losses. I don't just mean painful in the heartbreak. I mean painful as Figueiredo abuses people when they fight him. So he took a lot of damage in those fights, and he kind of came back looking a little bit older. He's usually not out-wrestled like that. He was just beat in every position by Askarov, and it was pretty impressive fight. I had actually picked against Askarov, partially due to the weight miss, and also because Benavidez has shown to be able to bounce back very well in non-title fights. But man, that I was also, my concern was that he would look old overnight, and he looked old. He didn't look good. Dana said it's not time to have that conversation, meaning like, is it time to retire this guy? But I think his days of he said he didn't want to fight just to fight. He wanted to, if there was a path to a title, or there was a fighting the top guys in the world. I think he's going to continue to fight the top guys in the world, but now it's a springboard type of fight that he gets. You beat him and you're a top 5.
Yeah, I mean, Benavidez, suffers from Dan Hardy syndrome. To a certain extent, Dan Henderson, although Dan Henderson left and won a championship somewhere else, where at least when and you can think of a few other guys, at least when they were in the UFC, they were always legitimately one of the best, but just weren't as good as the guy that happened to be the champion. And Benavidez's unfortunate situation is that he's been the second best or third best for a really long time, and the championship has changed above him. He just couldn't beat the champion at the time,
That's right.
And so he's in a weird situation. He's going to go down with, in that argument, which is a cool argument, which is when there's not
one of the best guys.
And you do a podcast, we'll definitely do, best fighter not to have a championship argument. And he's definitely going to be up there on the list for that. It's unfortunate. I don't think it's the time for him to hang it up. I think he's going to be in the top 5 in a pretty good division for a while. Sure. I just think Askarov is one of these Russian / Dagestani guys, and Askarov's not Dagestani, but I'm just trying to separate the two, even though Dagestan is in Russia, right? But one of these guys from Eastern Europe that are starting to come over and take over the game,
Very much.
Yeah, it's just too much. It's really just active wrestling that these guys are coming in with. They're coming in with that Sambo style where they're still punching you and holding you down and doing what we've always thought wrestlers should do, is just like really make you feel bad that you can't get up, essentially, and so I don't think Benavidez is done, but I do think he's a gatekeeper right now, and Askarov deserves the fight. It's just unfortunate that these guys, Jan was the same way, he built himself up, and there's just not good marketing behind them, and they're really for Askarov, I mean, there should be something. People should be calling him. All you got to do is call people the next Khabib. Like just the next fucking Khabib, next freaking Khabib, and like at least get people like talking about him or something, you know?
I mean, they could do what they did with Matt Hamill. Matt Hamill was deaf, currently still is deaf, and I don't think that's changing. So is Askar Askarov, and they could market it that way as well. So,
you know something, I don't like to see these. You know, I don't know that Benavidez would have got the title shot, but I don't like to see these title eliminator type fights being buried. You know,
yeah,
when you have Rocket versus Thiago Santos, which is not a title eliminator fight, it's a title build-up fight in there. It's been a long time now. You know that we need to do a little bit of work to make these lower divisions, a little more respected. You know, because they're better fighters overall. Like once you get to like 155 and lower, like the divisions are just really good, talent-wise. You know, we don't have the same problem that we do when we're talking about the heavyweights, you know, and the heavyweights are at their best that they've been in years as far as like talent and fights to make, you know. But there's just a ton of great fights down there, and Askarov deserves a little more, I guess. I don't know, you know.
Yeah, I think he's going to get the rub now. I don't know. I think that he may get the winner. I mean, he could be in line for the winner of Figueiredo-Moreno rematch. He's right there.
Yeah, I think he's got to be the next fight. And listen, if he gets Figueiredo, it could be the first ever flyweight championship fight fought at 35 because they both keep missing weight.
They both miss weight. They're both a liability for the weight class.
Yeah, Figueiredo recently missed weight. I mean, he would miss weight against Benavidez, right? So that's why they fought that one again. So, yeah. I mean, that's the problem really with them. You know, as good as they are, it's tough to make 125, man, I guess.
Yeah, because most of these 25-pounders are just short dudes that don't want to fight 35. And half of them have already fought at 35. 125 is like, dude, if you just sweat out 10 more pounds, you have a shot at, this other weight class. That's really all it is. They're mostly 35-pound guys.
Yeah, in general. Okay, let's end it there. So this is obviously live. This is going to appear on YouTube, on the Chaotic Sports YouTube channel. You can find us on all the podcast networks. So Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, everywhere you want. Find us on Twitter at Chaotic Sports, at Fist on Chin. Afshin's at Afman, Amazing. He's even started. He saw me posting last night, so he's even started tweeting a little bit. It's amazing.
That was my gateway. That was my gateway drug.
That's your gateway, right?
I jumped on your tweets.
Yeah, and do it that way. That's fine. And anyway, I'll let you give your final thoughts, and then I'll close it up.
Great card. It was fun to be on the Chaotic Sports Network with Fist on Chin programming. I love that we're doing this. Keep watching, everyone. Stay tuned. We're going to put out 2 videos minimum each time there is an event going on, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Okay. Thank you guys for watching.
Okay. Bye, guys.